Hey, welcome to The Explainer. Today we are diving into two totally different ways people make choices. And here's the kicker. We're going to see why one style, even though it often leads to better results on paper, can actually make you feel a whole lot worse.
So let me ask you this. Have you ever fired up Netflix, ready to watch a movie, and then you just scroll and scroll for like 20 minutes and end up watching nothing? Or, when you're trying to pick a restaurant and there are 50 different options on your app. That feeling, that exhaustion, that's what we're talking about. In that feeling, it actually gets at something psychologists call the problem with choice. Because it turns out that having endless options isn't always the amazing gift we think it is.
For the longest time, we all kind of assumed that more choice is always a good thing. Freedom, right? But a ton of research actually shows the complete opposite. It's called the paradox of choice. When we have too many options, we can get frozen. We can't decide. And even when we do finally pick something, we often feel less satisfied with it.
Okay, so to really understand why more choice can be a problem, we need to look at two really fundamental ways people approach making a decision. You can think of it like a spectrum, and researchers place all of us somewhere between being a maximizer and a satisficer.
So first up, we have the maximizer. This person is on a mission, a quest for the absolute, undisputed best. It doesn't matter if they're buying a car or just picking a gym at the grocery store. They feel this deep need to check out every single option to make sure their choice is literally perfect.
And then, on the other end of the spectrum, you've got the satisficer. They're different. They have a set of standards in their head, a good enough threshold. And the second they find an option that meets that threshold, boom, the search is over. They pick it, and they move on with their life. You can really boil the whole difference down to one simple question. The maximizer is always asking, is this the best possible option out there in the entire universe? Meanwhile, the satisficer is just asking, hey, does this option meet my needs? It's the difference between trying to climb the absolute highest peak versus just, getting over a bar that you've set for yourself.
Now, you'd probably assume that the maximizer's hard work pays off, right? All that searching must lead to better outcomes and more happiness. Well, this is where we get to the core paradox of this whole thing, and it's summed up perfectly by the title of a huge study on this, Doing Better But Feeling Worse.
So, to put this to the test, researchers did something really clever. They followed a bunch of graduating college students from 11 different universities while they were on the hunt for their first real job. First, they figured out where each student fell on that maximizer-satisficer scale, and then they just watched to see what happened. So, what did they find? Well, if you just look at the numbers, the maximizers won. Big time. On average, the students who were strong maximizers landed jobs with starting salaries that were a full 20% higher than the jobs the satisficers got. But, and this is the whole paradox right here, even though they were earning more money, the maximizers actually reported feeling worse about the jobs they got. They were less satisfied, and they felt way more stress and anxiety during the whole job search. They did better objectively, but they felt worse subjectively. And this isn't just about jobs, Wider research shows the same pattern again and again. Being a maximizer is consistently linked with less happiness, less optimism, and even lower self-esteem. And at the same time, it's linked to more regret and even higher rates of depression. So this just raises this giant question. Why, right? Why would a strategy that gets you a better outcome on paper so often lead to you feeling worse? What is possibly going on in the mind of a maximizer that turns a win into what feels like a loss? This is the thinker's dilemma.
Well, the answer seems to lie in three key psychological drivers. A maximizer's whole process basically creates this perfect storm of second-guessing and social comparison, and that's what ultimately poisons their own satisfaction.
This quote here, it really gets to the heart of it. Think about it. Because they investigate so many options, maximizers are literally haunted by all the good things they saw in the choices they didn't pick. That just fuels regret. And since they don't have that internal good enough meter, they're forced to look at everyone else to see how they're doing, which is a comparison game that is basically impossible to win.
So what's the engine that powers this exhausting search? Well, researchers have a name for it: need for cognition. It's not about how smart you are. It's about how much you actually enjoy the act of thinking. People with a high need for cognition love wrestling with complex problems, and maximizers tend to have this in spades. It's what drives them to analyze everything to death. All right, let's see this in action with a quick puzzle. A bat and a ball cost $1.10 total. The bat costs exactly $1 more than the ball. So, how much does the ball cost? I'll give you a second. Don't just shout out the first thing that pops into your head. Really think it through. Okay, if you said 10 cents, don't worry, that's the super common, intuitive answer. But the correct answer is actually 5 cents. People who jump to that fast, easy answer are sometimes called cognitive misers. But maximizers, their high need for cognition makes them more likely to stop, override that first impulse, think a little deeper, and get to the right solution. It's the exact same mental muscle they use for all their decisions. Okay, so let's pull all of this together. Now that you know about this stuff, you can probably start to see these tendencies in yourself and definitely in other people you know.
So here it is, the side-by-side breakdown. Maximizers go through this exhaustive process, right, to find the best. And that often gets them better objective results, like that higher salary. But the Satisficers, they use a much more efficient process to find good enough. And they're the ones who get to walk away feeling more content and with a lot less regret.
And it's so important to see that this isn't about which style is better or worse. It's a fundamental trade-off. Being a maximizer might land you that slightly better job, but it could come at the cost of your own peace of mind. And being a satisficer might mean you leave a slightly better option on the table, but it often leads to a much greater sense of contentment.
This quote from the original research just captures the whole lesson perfectly. The relentless chase for the best can paradoxically end up making us feel worse. It's a really powerful reminder that how we make our decisions can be just as important as the decisions themselves.
And all of this leaves us with one last big question to think about. The next time you're facing a choice, what are you going to prioritize? Is it better to have the best or to feel the best? The answer might just change how you decide everything. Thanks so much for joining us for this Explain.